child in any way. And not child labor, but naturally in a family, right? When the children, especially when they grow up a little bit, they're going to clean, they're going to do share in the housework just like their parents would. But once you've done tahrir, you no longer have that right. The child's no longer yours. He no longer lives in your house. He's in the temple. The priests in the temple take care of him, raise him, teach him, and you no longer have that right as a parent. And you think about that, is that fair? And what about the child? I was thinking about the child. Does the parent have the right to sign off his child and say, you know, I as the parent, I'm going to kind of place my child in bondage for life, right? True, it's a good thing. It's not slavery. It's not, you're not turning him over to be a slave of somebody, but you're still making this choice for this child, and it might seem like, you know, that's not a very nice thing to do without consulting the child. The child should have some say in it. So there's no indication in the Quran or from any other sources that this is an agreement for life or a commitment for life, right? But rather, like, parents have this right over the child for a certain age, right? Whether it be 2 years or until they're baligh or baligha, right? When they reach puberty and they're considered by Allah to be adults and responsible, fully responsible for their own affairs, their own actions. Right? Until that time, the parents do have this right, this wilaya, this authority over the child. I shouldn't say parents. In Islamic law, at least it's the father. Right? The mother has a right up to 2 years, and then the father has this right and obligation up to the time when the child is baligh or baligha. For a boy, for a girl, it extends even further with respect to marriage until she's finally married. Right? He still has that authority over her. So whatever this tahrir is, it's limited to that period of time. And while the parents have this right and obligation to have the child with them and do all these things with that child, during that time period they turn it over and say, look, you can go, you're now in the service of the temple. But once the child reaches bulugh, right, and if it was Islamic law, it would be the girl reaching, how many? 9 years old, and the boy reaching 15 years old in the lunar calendar. At that age then, the child has the discretion. And the child can choose and say, I want to continue in this service and become a priest, for instance, or no, I want to go and do something else, and go to computers and become an engineer or something like that. Okay, so that's something about tahrir as well. Another interesting point is the same statement. She says, my Lord, I dedicate to you what is in my womb. And she doesn't think about like if you're an expected parent, right? Even nowadays we have ultrasounds and stuff. You can kind of, not 100% certainty, but with a lot of certainty you can determine the sex of the child. But still, I would guess that most parents would still not commit themselves 100% and say it's definitely 100%. I'm certain it's going to be a boy, or I'm certain it's going to be a girl. You still entertain the possibility that the ultrasound could be wrong, and it is. It can be wrong. It could. You can see things mistakenly. How is it that Hannah, with 100% certainty, says, I know this child is a boy and I'm going to dedicate him to the service of you? Right? Because the tahrir could not happen in their tradition with girls. Girls weren't allowed in the temple. Certainly not to be servants of the temple. It had to be a boy. So with certainty she says, she didn't say like, if it's a boy, then I do this. If it's a girl, then that's something else. She says, with certainty, whatever's in my belly, which is definitely a boy, is dedicated to your service. Right? So this then, Allah Ta'ala uses as one of the clues that shows that she must have known from some source, from Allah Himself in some way, that it is a boy. Right? There's no explicit mention in the Quran of anything like that, any wahi or any ilham, any revelation or any sort of inspiration that occurred. But the fact that she knows for certain. Okay. She says this. She says, I dedicate him to your service. One thing to notice is that the Quran, whenever it quotes people, it always makes sure that it quotes only right statements. If the Quran ever quotes a wrong statement from somebody, from a pharaoh or from anyone, then immediately, as soon as it quotes it from them, it bashes them and says, but, or kalla, or bal, or it refutes it in some way and says, but he was wrong. and this is the right answer. Right? So whenever the Quran mentions something, a quote from somebody, if it's right, then it won't say anything. It'll just quote it and then go on to continue with the story. But if it's wrong, if it's a false thing, if it's a kind of a baseless sort of assertion, then it'll refute it and say, kalla. Right? Rather, that's not the case. Okay? So the fact that Allah quotes Hannah saying this and doesn't refute it indicates that what she said is true, and she couldn't know this by herself. They didn't have ultrasounds back then, and she had no other indication of it. It wasn't superstition, because if it was superstition, like sometimes in our different cultures and stuff, they have like different superstitions that if you have heartburn, then it's a boy, or if you have if you could see the woman looks pregnant from the back, then it's a girl or a boy. Like they have all these different superstitions for how you can determine the sex from in different ways by looking at the woman, the way she walks, or things like that. But she wasn't basing this on superstition. Otherwise, the Quran would have refuted her and said, what knowledge do you have of the sex of your child? And only Allah knows this. Right? So the fact that it quotes it and then doesn't refute it indicates that what she said is true. And so it must have been somehow linked to revelation. Either she herself saw a dream or heard an angel speak and it told her, or as the traditions mention, if Imran, who was a prophet, he was spoken to and he was informed of this reality. And this is actually probably the case. We have a tradition, I'm going to read it from Kitab al-Kafi. In Kitab al-Kafi, volume number 1, there's a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى أَوْحَى إِلَىٰ عِمْرَانَ أَنِّي وَاهِبٌ لَكَ ذَكَرًا سَوِيًّا مُبَارَكًا يُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ وَيُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَجَاعِلُهُ رَسُولًا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. He says that Allah revealed to Imran, right, which indicates he was a prophet. He revealed to Imran that I am going to give you a male child who's well-formed, beautiful, like in terms of his form, he's beautiful, and he's also mubarak, he's full of goodness, who will cure people who are congenitally blind and let them see again, who will cure the leper, and who will raise the dead, all by God's leave. And I'm going to make him into a messenger to the children of Israel. So when Imran got this message, then he told Hannah, فَحَدَّثَ عِمْرَانُ إِمْرَأَتَهُ حَنَّةَ بِذَلِكَ. So Imran tells Hannah, وَهِيَ أُمُّ مَرْيَمَ.